This episode is presented by the Visit Cedar City Brian Head Tourism Bureau. Discover the art of adventure at Utah's gateway to the parks. Cedar City is within a few hours' drive from 6 different national parks and monuments, and only 30 minutes from fresh snow at Brian Head Resort. Check out visitcedarcity.com to plan your next trip. This episode is sponsored by the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center, dedicated to supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs. It provides resources and services aimed at fostering business creation, growth, and retention. The center features the Makerspace, where entrepreneurs and small businesses can have access to 3D printers, video production, and photography equipment, t-shirt printing, and more. Whether you're starting a new venture or looking to expand an existing one, the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center offers the tools and guidance to help you succeed. To learn more and get involved, visit innovationcenter.cc. Hello and welcome to another episode of Explore Local Podcast, presented by Visit Cedar City Brian Head in partnership with Cedar City Iron County Economic Development. This is produced by Dallas Smith Media, and I'm your host, David Johnson, Economic Development Director for Cedar City and Iron County. All right, and today we have Tayson Whittaker with Outdoor Vitals. You're the founder and CEO of Outdoor Vitals. Do you want to tell us a little bit, high level, what is Outdoor Vitals?
Yeah, we're a premium backpacking and ultralight backpacking space right now, where we're really designing apparel and backpacking gear. We've been doing that for 10 years now.
Oh, wow.
But started with sleeping bags, kind of went from sleeping bags to tents and backpacks, and eventually got into apparel around 2018. And just been doing that as a direct to consumer brand for 10 years now.
So how did you initially get into that market? Were you just backpacking one day and was like, I'm sick of this junky stuff, I'm going to design my own? How did that come about? Yeah,
I mean, I grew up an outdoorsman, I guess you could say. Like, I always spent a lot of time outside. I grew up in Richfield, so just up the road from here.
Yeah.
But not a whole lot in the backpacking space. It wasn't until I was in college here at SUU that I started to backpack, right? And I started to invest in what gear I could afford, I guess. So I bought like a decent backpack, and it blew me away how much better it was. And then I was like, man, I really need a new sleeping bag. My sleeping bag is 9 pounds and takes up my entire backpack. Like this isn't
like
gonna work.
One of those old quilted ones or something?
It was just like the big square ones. It's a 0 degree bag that really wasn't a 0 degree bag, but you thought it was because it said it on the label. And so like it became apparent I needed to upgrade a few pieces. And then when I upgraded those pieces, it just kind of like shattered me of like how much better the experience was. Mm-hmm. Like I had no idea that you could sleep warm outside. Yeah. Like zero. Like dead of summer, I still was freezing cold outside, doing all the wrong things, sleeping on a cot with no pad underneath it. And, again, like taking sleeping bag ratings at face value. And so as I started to use better gear, and this wasn't even like the most premium gear. This was just like mid-tier, better stuff than Walmart has to offer.
Right.
And it shocked me so much that I'm like, man, I've got to figure out a way to bring this to the masses. If I do it direct to consumer, I import it directly. I think we could help a lot of people, and kind of, per se, like the initial tagline of the company was like opening the outdoors to everyone, right? Like get more people out there, have more enjoyable experiences, and try to avoid those conversations where you hear people like, oh yeah, I went backpacking one time, or I went camping one time and I froze and I'll never go again. And it's like, man, that's a lifetime of amazing adventures that are so critical in this like tech heavy world that you've written off because of a bad experience. And a lot of that, comes down to gear and expensive gear and things like that. So
yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of just when I've tried to forgive the poor comparison, but it reminds me when I'm like trying to build something or put something together at home. And I'm like, I don't feel like going and grabbing the screwdriver that I need. So I'm like trying to jimmy rig, do it. And finally I go and grab the right tool to put together whatever I'm building. And it's like 10 times easier, right? I mean, that's how the right gear, how much of a difference the right gear matters.
Yeah. It builds so much confidence for you, right? Like so much of what keeps people from going in the outdoors is fear. And most of fear is unknown, right? Like you don't know if you'll be cold. You don't know if you'll have a good time. You don't know the trail, right? So the more you go, or the more confidence that you can build in that, and a lot of that confidence can come from things like gear, the more you're actually going to go and do it as well. And so there's a real tight relationship for us in terms of not just providing gear that they can have a ton of confidence in, but we also do a lot of educating to like help people get out there. In fact, we're kicking off a challenge tomorrow called our 100-mile challenge. This is actually a challenge we do. Like we don't make any money on it. We try not to lose money on it, really.
Sure, yeah.
And the whole point is to get people to go do a bucket list dream hike. And we take them through a 3-month course and process of helping them train and work through injuries and plan, backup plans and dial in gear and all these kinds of things. But gear is like 10, 20% of it, which is like our whole business, right? 80% of it is just building confidence in other ways. And so, but we're so connected for us, like our purpose is to connect people to the vital outdoors. So much of it comes back to just that. But yeah, I mean, I look back at growing up and it's amazing that I still like the outdoors without any like terrible experiences.
You have to really love the grind. Yeah. Well, in fact, why don't we dive into that? What got you as a kid into the outdoors? Was it just something you did as a family, or how did you get into it? Yeah.
So my family, like we had a 30-year-old trailer and they'd drag it up the mountain and we'd leave it for a week or two at a time. And then we'd go up on weekends and like camp in that trailer. And it was so small that most of the time me and my brother would like sleep outside the trailer. Right. And so there was some novelty there, but I mean, I just loved being on the mountain. I loved fishing. I had a dirt bike. And so it was like anytime I could get on the dirt bike, like I was so happy. And so that was a big part of it. And then I grew up from a family of hunters. My roots go back to like Paiute County and we always hunted. And so between kind of those things, I was always outdoors. And then growing up in Richfield, there's not a lot to do, but go outside. Right. Yeah. And so I had a bunch of boys that I grew up with in a small neighborhood, and we just were always out doing something, whether it's riding bikes or going up in the hills and hiking around. So outdoors was always a part of it, but backpacking specifically wasn't until college. But I always knew I wanted to tie some of that together. So I came to SUU wanting to be an entrepreneur. And while I was there, I ended up in a finance degree, and I ended up starting the entrepreneurship club while I was there, because that's like what I was really passionate about. Is I actually wanted to start a business more than, go be a finance guy. That's still going on, right? Yeah, it's grown tremendously now. It's a really cool program that they've invested more into. They kind of did a full 180 on that. Just it went from me like begging the dean to start the club, like, please let me start this. I'll check all the boxes. And like, I don't know, to like, it's a huge program for him. It brings a lot of people in. It brings a lot of investors in. It does a lot of good for him now. So it's really cool to see what that's done. But yeah, in the beginning, I was just bringing in guest speakers, and then we'd meet once a month and like do like business pitch ideas and work through problems as a group. And that's what it was. Right. So yeah, that's actually one of the things, sorry to digress on that, but that's one of the things at SUU that's impressed me, is that entrepreneur outreach for the students and the competitions that they have, and just connecting students with the idea. So that's really cool to hear. You had, sounds like a pretty important hand in getting that rolling. I mean, I definitely started it, but it grew a ton when they got some key mentors and investors and stuff from that had done things up north at different schools. And so they came down and brought the money and brought relationships, and it grew a lot. It grew a lot from there. But yeah, I mean, originally that was getting pushed out by me. And then, the last month of college is when I filed for this business. Oh, really? It's an LLC. So what year was that? That was 2014. Okay. So, I mean, if you want the whole story, I can go through that, but yeah, really, really humble beginnings. Like I had a day job, right? All that business. And, literally I started importing samples. So samples from factories. I'm like, hey, I want to see this bag. I'd import it, cause I had like $500 to maybe throw at this idea that I had. And then I would actually sell the samples and then reinvest the money and buy more samples. So would the sample was like, it wasn't just like the material, it was like a whole. It was a whole sleeping bag, right? Wow. But like it would like have no logos on it, right? Or no tags on it or anything like that. And so, I would just sell that direct online. And in the very beginning, it was specifically through Amazon. That was like the stepping stone. I was like, well, I can get started here without incurring a bunch of other costs, and then grow the brand off of Amazon. I was just selling samples, went from buying 1 to buying 3 to buying 5 to buying 10. And then finally I was like, okay, how many would it take me to put my own logo on this thing? And they're like, if you bought 50, we'd put a logo on it, which in hindsight is insanity. Like my minimum quantities now are way over that, you know, but working with higher level factories, obviously today than then. And, so I put down all the money I had essentially to buy 50 sleeping bags. And I'd built some confidence, but we got them in and it was like November. So a good sales time for, coming up on Christmas, and we sold like all 50 in like 2 weeks. And I was like, hey, I think we've got something here.
Yeah.
So kind of bootstrapped that on the side of my day job for another year after that. And then went full time with it. So
you found these vendors or suppliers, whatever you want to call them. It sounds like they already kind of had the pre-made ones. You were seeing if it was the quality that you wanted to sell direct.
Correct.
But did at some point you start diving into the design yourself and giving these factories, this is the design we want? How did you go about that process or move into that? Yeah.
So I had learned Photoshop. I had actually worked with a company doing all of their marketing and finance that were importing products in the health space here in town. Kind of side story, but I ended up walking in there and being like, I'm going to sweep your guys' floor during my lunch breaks, but I want to work here because I want to learn how to import product, how to sell online.
What was the place again?
It's called Health and Med, healthandmed.com. So I worked there for a handful of years, but now I've derailed my own thought here. But so I learned some marketing things there, right? So I learned Photoshop, and so what I would do is I would just simply take photos of things and I just manipulate them in Photoshop and try to pull some dimensions and stick it right on images. And so I'd build what's now called a tech pack. I'd build my own kind of version of a tech pack and send that to the factories. And then factories have sample rooms, and in the sample rooms, that's like their best sewers, like their most skilled people. And they would, look at these images that I would draw, and they would just actually build a product for me and then send it back, and I'd look at it and we'd go through prototypes that way. And a lot of times, because I had no actual design experience, background in design, they would come up with things that were like better, or like, I'd like specifically not give them a ton of detail because I knew that they would figure out how to piece this together better than I would.
Yeah.
Right?
They would see kind of what you were going for and put it together.
Yeah. And so it wasn't the most efficient, it wasn't the absolute best, but yeah, I designed product for quite a few years that way. And I didn't bring on a full-time designer until about 2019, I believe. Okay. So,
wow. So, that kind of reminds, so where are you ordering out of these factories you're working with? I'm assuming internationally.
Yeah. And initially it was China. Now it's all through Vietnam, but now our supply chains are massive, right? You're ordering fabrics from Japan, you're shipping them to Vietnam, you're cutting and sewing there and stuff like that. So you're
ordering fabrics and sending it to the manufacturer and say, hey, use these materials.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. But in the beginning it was like, I would call out features and specs and what materials, and they would just source everything. Right.
Oh, really? Okay.
It was through China at that point.
That's crazy. How did you even make those connections to say, hey, factory in China, make my sleeping bag?
It's more mainstream now, but through Alibaba, Alibaba.com. I actually took it a step further because I had no money. I went through AliExpress, which is more of a consumer direct system that's a sister company to Alibaba. So I could order a couple at a time.
Yeah.
And that's really how I got started. Cause like I say, I was paying my own way through college and, working a side job and stuff. So like $500 was not nothing to me. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I started actually through the website called AliExpress and then turned that into just buying more quantities through them and then developing a factory relationship that way.
So then when you're buying that much, at some point, do they reach out to you, or how do you get that contact?
Yeah. Eventually you leave the platform. You're like, okay, I'll wire you this money.
I see.
And you just leave all that behind and you work through email and wires. But
yeah. Maybe I shouldn't give away my wife's idea, but we're big hikers, outdoorsy, and something my wife's always talked about. And I've seen, I think, Camelback doing some of this. But like the water vests the Camelbacks essentially for kids. Okay. She's always wanted to design something because there's a couple things with kids in hiking. It's have plenty of water and snacks. Usually, you have to have a decent amount of shade along your hike. And usually if there's a friend, it helps them along. And we do trail running and we have running vests that you basically put a bladder in and everything, but it just conforms to your body better than than say the backpack style. And she always wanted to design, you know, a kid size vest, but we just were always clueless. Like, well, how do you even go about finding someone to design and create this for you and stuff? But anyway, so that's interesting to hear about how you went about that.
Yeah, backpacks are challenging too, because if you could like tear apart a backpack and lay it on a table, every single individual piece, you can have 100 different pieces. Right? Every trim piece, every piece of webbing, every piece of grow grain, every piece of, you know, like all the mesh, all the, like it becomes very, very complicated.
Yeah.
And so the first attempt at designing a backpack for me taught me how complicated they are. And that's actually how I ended up finding our other designers. I went up to Utah State has a program where it's just a product design program. And it was the first year graduate, and I'd seen that he'd sewn his own backpack, and I got looking at it. I'm like, man, that's really impressive work, you know? But yeah, backpacks are tough. That's a cool idea. Like we actually have a fast pack. So it's a vest style backpack for like multi-day things. So like we've done, usually like 2 nights maximum in it, but you can cover a lot bigger ground because you can run with the pack.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But for kids, it would be nice. And once you get used to a vest, you're like, it's so much more comfortable that I can see the appeal there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The vest is just the way it conforms to your body a little more. It sits up a little higher, so it's not dragging your bag down. And if you're running, it's always faster, right? You know, so like
everything's right at hand, right? Your snacks are right there. Your drinks are right there. Your mixes.
It really minimizes the crying a lot from the children. I probably should leave one of my children unnamed. I will. But there was one summer where we just hiked the heck out of every place we ever went. And this one child was like, I never want to hike again, you know, but ironically, later, I think it was the next summer or fall or something, she said, we haven't gone hiking for a while. I kind of want to go on a hike. And I was like, gotcha. You know,
that's a proud moment. Yes, I understand that.
Yeah. I
don't know what I did right, but it's something right here. It's great.
We got that taste. You got a flavor for it. So
I kind of do the same thing. I've got 2 kids, and I take them on their first backpacking trip when they're 3. So they start coming with me when they're 3, and I take them to, you know, a gas station or a store, and I say, you can pick any candy you want. And then I let them carry a backpack. And the only thing in that backpack is one bottle of water and the candy, right? And then it just becomes, anytime they start complaining, it's like, all right, let's go like 30 more yards and we'll stop for a candy break. And I mean, they become very frequent sometimes, but it's effective.
my kids always, even up until now, some of my teenagers joke about it, but my kids through elementary were like, Dad, please give me a piggyback ride. And I'm like, I can give you a piggyback ride for like 10 feet. But even like my kids, when they were, I don't know, between like 3 and 6, I'm like, maybe I'm a mean dad, but I'm like, you can walk, you know? And what I would teach them, I was like, hold my hand and you'll have daddy power. That's what we call it, daddy power, because I can help kind of tug them along, right, on these hikes. But
yeah, they have way more energy than they think they do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it'll be conveyed through the car if they don't hike sufficiently.
Or you like get to a lake and all of a sudden they're sprinting and running everywhere. You're like, you couldn't take a step right over there, but now.
Exactly. Well, my son, one time we did this hike. Oh gosh, it was some slots. I'm the name slipping my mind. Anyways, we were doing these little slot canyon things, and he was, I don't know, probably 3 or 4, and we thought we had packed him shoes, but all he was wearing was his Spider-Man Walmart sandals that were not staying on, had no traction. Yeah. But the hike was like sandy and slick rock and stuff in between these little walls or whatever, slots. And he ended up hiking the entire time. I think we did a total of like 6 miles. Okay, I'm not a bad parent, just for this record. He ended up hiking.
Incriminating yourself here.
I know. In the slots, hiking on that soft sand, just barefoot. And we called him the barefoot baby. And in between the slots, you know, I'd pick him up, give him a shoulder ride because it was hot. But being in those slots with the shade and just things to see, features, it's amazing how really keeps their attention. And I think that's kind of the purpose. I was reading a little bit about your 100-mile challenge. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the purpose of that 100-mile challenge, from what I understand, right? There's a really great story about a father and daughter, I think, that I was reading about. You want to maybe tell a little bit more?
So in fact, I saw the dad. He's actually the soccer coach at BYU.
Oh, okay.
And they just won their like 6th national championship, but he was just coming through Cedar, and I saw him this week. But he took the 100-mile challenge and was like, I want to do this with my daughter. Let's make this a challenge to hike 100 miles over the course of a summer. And so that's what they did. And the last hike that they did to finish the 100 miles, they went and hiked Kings Peak, which if you've never hiked Kings Peak, it's 13,500 feet. It's the highest peak in Utah, and you have to approach it. The approach is 13 miles, right? And so it's a 26-mile round trip hike. And they went and backpacked it and hiked it. And she's 9 years old. And I'm like, man, she looks happier at the top than the first time I made it to the top of that peak. You know, it was really, really impressive. But those are the kind of stories that we're constantly seeing. So like, you know, helping people get out there and just develop quality relationships, quality time. Like, I'm sure that they will never forget that summer where they hiked 100 miles as a team, and now they're moving on, right? They hiked Mount Whitney this last year as a dad and daughter, right? And then they're going to go hike Kings Peak with and bring their younger brother now, and like, it's really cool to just be like, well, you know, he's obviously a goal-oriented guy, right? And he's a great case study to be like, this is what we're going for. But we see cases like that over and over and over, you know, at that 100-mile challenges. Sometimes people just need to raise their hand, commit to something a little bit bigger, and commit earlier in the year, and then they can make the plans. And, you know, we kind of are there to guide them and push them. And there's a sense of community. We get hundreds and hundreds of people doing this. And then we get them in a Facebook group, and they're all building on each other. But yeah, the stories that we get from that are absolutely incredible. And in my opinion, getting outside is like the yin to the yang of like technology now, right? Like everything's bombarding us so fast and just constantly, right? And so disconnecting from all that, like the best way that I found to disconnect from all that is, you know, to spend time outside and to just, you know, go where phones don't work, go where, you know, that kind of thing. And those are big resets. And yeah, sometimes like you don't want to do like harder challenges, like 100-mile challenge. I totally get that. Like, don't start there. Right. But like sometimes like the physical effort too of being outside, and the, you know, just the fact that Mother Nature has her own plans. Yeah. Also allows a lot of growth to happen too, where like it brings a lot of perspective for me personally, right? Like when I get out there and I'm like, I don't know. Last year I went and hiked 100 miles in the Wind Rivers. I did it solo because I had an injury, so I couldn't do our normal planned one. So I ended up going solo to the Wind Rivers and hiking 100 miles. And I only had 4 days to do it. And so I was doing 25 miles a day. And it's extremely hard, right? And it's, you know, the times it's cold, the times it's hot, at times it's this. But what happens inevitably when you go and do something that hard, specifically in the outdoors, I feel like, is you come back with a different perspective. And when you're like upset by some little convenience that doesn't happen in your life, you're like, this is a non-issue. Like, right? Like, why was I letting this thing build up in my life when in reality, like it's actually not hard, or it's actually not difficult. And you just have this greater, I don't know, perspective of maybe what is important, right? Like, I say the same thing with travel. Like I get to travel a lot to other countries and spend a couple of years in Malaysia and Singapore, and like those things always, I feel like, provide perspective. But I think a great way to get perspective and like recenter your life is just getting outside. So that's why we do the 100-mile challenge. It's really, really incredible to just read those stories. It's the most powerful thing I do every single year, is to get to the end of that and just read the stories that come in of relationships that were built, or people losing weight, or people getting outside that haven't backpacked in 20 years. Like they're really, really powerful.
Yeah. And I personally think it's smart for a business to do things like that, because what it's demonstrating is the core of what you were saying before, of what your real mission is, you know, to try to get people outdoors to have a good experience. Your equipment is meant to provide a positive experience, so they'll want to keep coming back out more. But by staying true to your mission, you're helping build a loyalty and a love. That love of the outdoors then becomes associated with the love of a product or a company and what you stand for, right? That's why you see, without naming other outdoor companies necessarily, but there's other outdoor companies that have just these huge followings, either because maybe they give a portion of their proceeds to something, or because they're environmentally friendly, and people who have find a love for that, find a love for those companies. In fact, that actually reminded me, you also have a program where you give back 1%, right? As well.
Yeah. Yep. And so we donate 1% of revenue, not profits. So we'll donate those. And, historically we've done a lot of water projects, but lately we've actually shifted that to donating a little bit more directly into like trail systems and wildernesses and things like that. And so, do
you have examples of some of the things?
The very last one that we did, like we'll donate to things like the Colorado Trail Association or the, Appalachian Trail Association. But the last one we did was actually an organization out of St. George called Get Outside. And they're just taking youth outside specifically. So they organize different trips and backpacking trips and outdoor adventures for youth, and they just help them get outside. So, we've put a lot of effort into there. I mean, living in a third world country, that was like where my original idea went to, is like, go help people there. But, my philosophies, I guess, changed a little bit over time where, I don't know, a lot of those people
see the need at home too.
A lot of, yeah. Like I think and I've seen it like in myself, but like, I realized at one point, and this is kind of a side tangent here, but like a lot of the people that you find in third world countries, they're happy. They're like really happy, even though they don't have anything. They're happy people, right? And so then to come in and be like, hey, I'm just going to like come in here and donate things and change your life is kind of like, am I just like accelerating something you don't want? Right. Like I'm a big believer in capitalism. Like if I could go in there and create businesses, I think that's the best way. Like not me create them, but help them create them. But
create
like
better quality of life. And
they can create the things that they need. But it's like I'm accelerating them to what? To the mental health illness stuff that we have in America now, because we have so much, right? It's kind of gone from the stage of like, it's not, do you have a I don't know, a place to live usually, or a cell phone or a car? It's like, how nice of one do you have? Like everyone works harder and harder for that, to have the nicer stuff. And a lot of that isn't nearly as fulfilling. Right. And so I think there's a ton of, mental health, emotional health, physical health challenges right here that we can help with. And it aligns better with also, I believe, with what our brand's doing. So we put a lot of focus on mental, emotional, physical health and trying to help people with that, both in terms of what we give away and also content we create and challenges we create. Cause I think that, like I say, kind of like going back to that perspective or shifts that people can have mentally and emotionally from just, getting outside more often are huge.
Yeah. So it's interesting. This kind of going on that digression. It's interesting how the pendulum of society or cultures swing with advances, right? So, we in the United States, we're a well-to-do culture for the most part. We still have poverty and issues and things, but a lot of the times what's interesting, and hopefully I'm making sense with this, is we've been prosperous, and everything from technology to our needs being met, we're almost needing to swing the pendulum back the other way to reconnect, with nature and humanity in some sort of ways. I think we saw that, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, when COVID hit, people were so cooped up and just on Zoom all the time that people started saying, I can't take this anymore. And we saw this boom in outdoor stuff. Right. So it's a trying to find that right balance. And I think you're right. I think, giving to organizations at home and addressing, mental health and getting kids to reconnect. I mean, there's some inner cities where I've spoken with people where they've never seen like the mountains or nature that wasn't a man-made, a man-designed park and things, which is just nuts to me, because I grew up doing all these outdoors things all the time with scouts and family and all kinds of stuff, running. In fact, I want to get back to something you were talking about earlier too. When you were talking about the doing the 100-mile hike, the challenge, and realizing that things aren't as bad when you get back. I really resonate with that, because part of what I believe running does for me and going outdoors is creating a mental toughness.
It's like the ice challenge, right? The cold plunge, right? It's like, like, I think that's the benefit of the cold plunge, is mental, not physical.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's kind of what I see like with my kids. When we go on a hike is, they're enjoying it, if there's cool things that distract them. But there's always these points where they're just like, this is so hard, carry me kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the hike, they're like, that was such an awesome hike. And they're proud of themselves. Yeah. That's what it does. And that's what running does for me. It's hard. There's moments where it's hard and moments where it feels really great and things are flowing smooth. Hiking does the same way. It's like, I've got to go up this other hill. I hate switchbacks on hikes. I loathe switchbacks. But they're just monotonous and annoying to me. Yeah. But then after you get to the top of those switchbacks, you're like, oh yeah, I just conquered that thing. You know what I mean? So anyways, digression, because you really got my...
There's a lot there, right? I started trail running a couple years back, and like last year I did my first 100-mile ultra.
Oh, wow.
But I was like the opposite of a runner. I was a defensive lineman. I threw at SU for a minute, like discus and stuff. And so like running was not in my category of words, right? But somehow I started running, and I saw like a massive uplift in physical health, mental health, like emotional health. And I think humans are meant to move, right? Whether it's walking, running, whatever it is, we're meant to move. Our bodies function better. Like we sit in chairs all day long, but we're really meant to be like on our feet and mobile all day long. And there's so much benefit there. But then also like running specifically, if you'll run outside, you're forcing that like outside sun time and that outside, all of that, like
fresh
happens,
air, vitamin D,
And so like for me, like the happiest and most well-balanced I've ever been is just when I'm doing some consistent miles every week. And that can be hiking, right? That can be backpacking, that can be all things, but there's a massive benefit to that. And part of that is the sense of accomplishment. I hate the first mile of every run. You know what I mean? Like I do not go out there to do the first mile.
You just quoted me verbatim. I say that every time.
Yeah.
The first mile is always the worst.
Or when you finish, like that sense of accomplishment is massive. And there's just so much opportunity for that. There's this concept called misogi, right? Which is, I believe, a Japanese word, but like, the idea is that you go do something really hard one time a year. And when you go do that really hard thing one time a year, it like I say, it's a perspective shift really. And then the whole concept is that it has to be like so hard that you have like a major chance of failure, like a 50% chance of failure. They typically say it should be outside, but I say it's a big movement, but if you look into that, if you just Googled that, you'll see a lot of people that do this and talk about the massive benefits to their life that they get from that specifically. So like, a lot of that has been 100-mile challenges for me, but then I've kind of upped it. Last year, it was really the 100-mile ultra. This year, I'm going to go do an R6 in the Grand Canyon. So, that'd be
rim to rim twice.
Yeah,
rim
to rim to rim.
Or I'm sorry, 3 times, right?
Yeah. So you'd start on the south end, right? Go to the north, back to the south, and then do it again.
Oh, okay. So it's
100 miles.
Rim to rim to rim 2 times.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So R6, but but like I find that those things are just incredibly beneficial to health, mental health, just all the above. Right. And so I get really passionate about that stuff.
Yeah, me too.
And obviously like the back end of what I do here in Cedar is just help people empower that through gear choices, through building confidence. We run a YouTube channel just to help people like build confidence that they can sleep warm outside or that they can hike this far or that they can, so much of our content does not sell any products. It's just a confidence builder for people to help them overcome unknowns so that they can go do some of this stuff and see the benefits that sit on the other side of it.
Well, you're building real relationships. I mean, any company, a lot of companies do, maybe even you've done this, but you can go out and pay someone to get more following for your social media or whatever. You can do paid ads for your website and things like that. And companies should do those things, but it's really those more organic type followers that are your more loyal followers, right? Creating that loyal fan base and everything. And
it's hard, right? Because we're direct to consumer, right? Which means finding new customers is a lot harder for us because we don't have product in every store across the nation like a lot of other brands. But our retention of customers is like off the charts. I've never talked to another online business with a higher retention of customers.
Really?
We do really, really well there.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I'll probably digress again into hiking and running and outdoor stuff here sometime in the conversation. One thing I wanted to ask, so your logos, like an owl. Is there any fun story behind coming up with your logo, and you alluded a little bit to the name. Any fun stories behind the name, the logo and branding?
There's define fun stories, right? I designed the very first one on a free program that I probably downloaded and put on an SU computer, to be honest. And it was an O and a V that looked kind of like an owl. And, I thought everyone could see the O, the V, and the owl.
Yeah.
And the idea behind the owl, to start there, I guess, is I believe we were coming into this day and age where people didn't want to just go to REI and be told what to buy. People wanted to do their own research. People wanted to be more connected to everything. And part of what we wanted to do was like be kind of like a mom and pop shop on the front end where people know the owner of the company, me, but we can operate like a corporation on the back end with economies of scale and sourcing and things like that. And anyways, but like that comes back to the consumer being, moving into this stage of transparency and, having their own knowledge, knowing way more about products. And so the idea came to me of like, they all want to be their wise owls, right? Like that's like this connotation that exists across the world, really, is this concept that like owls are a symbol of wisdom, right? It starts with like Athena, I believe, in Greek and mythology, and just tailors from all there. And it's really interesting, right? Because like owls have these big, wide piercing eyes, and they can't move their eyes. And so they have these massive eyes. They can see in the dark. They hunt at dark. They're silent. They're all these really interesting characteristics of an owl. But most people, I think, believe that owls are wise because they see everything, they hear everything, right? So the concept was that, like our consumers are moving into this stage where they are going to be their own wise owls, and that through the app, like seeing and hearing those things and then applying them creates the wisdom, right? And that's really what an ultralight backpacker is to us. Is it's not just like going and buying the gear. It's not just like checking the box of like I spent this much money. It's really refining your gear and spending time with your gear and becoming wise about how to use your gear. Like we really focus on the ultralight side of backpacking, which means that like basically before food and water, our backpacks are about 10 to 12 pounds total with all the gear we're taking, which means you can hit the trail, feel really comfortable. You're not overladen. And like, it's not like that Boy Scout, like image you're probably thinking of like got this huge, massive backpack on. And this is like the worst thing. It's like, no, like you got about as much weight in there as like you did your college textbook backpack, right? Or something like that. But really it's like the application of spending time outside where you develop that wisdom and you can simplify and become more of a minimalist and realize you don't need more crap. You just need, like the stuff you need to know how to use that stuff. And so that's really what the owl is to us. It's the symbol of wisdom and this direction that we saw a lot of consumers heading in with the online space specifically, where there's just so much information available out there. So but going back to the original story, funny stories. I was actually sitting in China and I was talking with the owner of multiple factories. He owns multiple factories across multiple countries. Probably employed 15,000 people. Right. And so I'm sitting there talking with him in his office and he finally just turns to me and says, it's like, I just got to ask something. He says, your logo, is it an alien? Like I had no idea. And I'm like, oh no. So then I was like, this is terrible. Right. So I go back, I put out a survey to see how many people saw the O and the V or the owl or both. And only 10% of people actually saw both. And I'm like, wow. I need to bring in someone to redesign our logo. So DecoreWorks ended up redesigning our logo and it looks a lot better, but
well, that's a great story. And it's a great story of humility, because a lot of times we come up with these ideas and we think we have this amazing idea or something that we see. And I've seen that in logo design so many times where a founder of a company creates this logo and they almost try to be over creative, and which makes the marketing of it and the branding of it difficult. Right.
Yeah.
And so my rule of thumb in most things, but logo and branding design is simplicity, right? Something people can grasp onto, and anyways, to not overcomplicate things, but
that's true. Very true. There's a lot of people that get married to their ideas, and that's a big detriment for sure. Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to dive into, and you were just starting to get into it, was the ultralight backpacking. That seems to be kind of a niche of your company. And I don't know that I have a specific question, but maybe talk a little bit more about that, what that is, why it's advantageous for hardcore hikers to the beginner, or, however you want to dive into that.
So starting with like why you would try to get your pack weight light, like just starting there. There's so many benefits to having a light pack on trail. One, you don't feel exhausted. You're not carrying this big, heavy, super uncomfortable thing on your back. You're not developing sores, or like chafing. You've just got like this very light pack, which physically is way better. So you can hike more, enjoy the experience more. You're not developing blisters on your feet because you have to wear big boots now because you got to have ankle support because you got this big, heavy pack on. It's like this conundrum that everything kind of tails into physically. Then too, like you go out into nature because you want to be like light and free and like be able to roam, be able to explore. And for me, like exploring is huge, which means I usually don't want to cover like 1 mile, right? There's trips I do when I take my kids out, like I think our record's like 3 miles on a backpacking trip in a day, right? Like, but I'm not trying to go for mileage then. But on these other trips, like I want to see stuff, right? Like going back to like that Wind River hike that I did last year, I wanted to see the circuit towers. I wanted to get over by Titcomb Basin. I wanted to see all this backcountry stuff that no one else sees. And there was a point that I was kind of having some injury issues because I hadn't been able to train the way that I wanted to train. And I had to be like, well, I got to cut something out. I'm like, I don't want to cut any of this out. Like, I want to see it all. Right. Yeah. But I'm on a limited window. I'm, like I have work, I've got kids, I've got these things. So it's like, I don't have infinite time to just go explore. And so being able to cover more miles is a big benefit of the ultralight side. And then too, like the more you go, the more you realize like you'll pack insecurities and things like that don't actually benefit you on the trail. So you just realize like, I can just not bring that and it doesn't impact me in any sort of a negative way. So what ultralight backpacking really is, I guess at its core, like I mentioned, is you're trying to get your pack weight down as low as you can. So that you are lighter, but you're really doing that like very strategically and I would say like I go out there with really light packs and I don't feel like I'm missing anything. In fact, sometimes I'll even bring a chair, right? Like you can buy chairs that are 15 ounces, right? Like it's not like I'm sacrificing and sleeping under a tarp instead of in a tent with a bug net or anything like that. You can do it all, but you do have to be kind of looking for some of those things and conscious of it. So, but like in the grand scheme of things, so much of ultralight backpacking is just for the feel on the trail or to cover a few more miles, or even if you're not covering more miles, like if I was to have that backpack and hike 5 miles in the day, like it feels like you took a walk around your neighborhood compared to like when you're in Boy Scouts and you go out on your like 50 miler or whatever it is. And you have this massive pack and you're carrying a mess kit and, all these trinkets, right. That don't add any value to it. And you're just miserable. Like first step out of camp, you're miserable. Last step into camp, you're even more miserable. Going in this like ultralight sector is just different. And the thing is too, buying more premium gear inherently, almost all of it is lighter anyways. So if you were to just go to like the big premium brands you can think of, a lot of their stuff already is more lightweight too, because performance is like a big word for us. We're trying to design products with performance, like a performance first mentality. So and that performance first mentality, weight is a big component of that. And you'll see that across other premium brands as well. But
yeah, that's actually why I prefer a running vest, is because forever I was like, I've got this Camelback, but it's such a pain to run with. And I don't want to carry a bottle. And I hate the weird like belts and arm things. And when I discovered these running vests for trail running, I'm like, oh my gosh, this thing's a miracle because it has a billion pockets. Like when you're talking about how complicated a backpack is, I immediately thought of my vest and the 100 different little pockets that you have all on the side and just how well thought out it is. It makes a huge difference because it's so light. Really, the weight is my snacks and my water. But outside of that, like the vest is nothing, right?
Yeah, it's under a pound. It's 10 ounces or so.
Yeah, exactly.
Just material.
Yeah, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, and if you were to think about like if you had to just take that example and you had to run with, let's just say it was a 10-pound pack, going from like a 2-pound pack to a 10-pound pack, like it wouldn't take you that many miles before you start to see all of the negative of that, whether that be the bags bouncing on you and creating rub marks, whether that be just, man, I can't get up this hill like I want to, I'm getting off pace. Like, it becomes an exponential change, right? So every pound that you get out of a backpack, at 20 miles in, it's exponentially more than, mile 1, 2. So it all just compounds and compounds, and weight is a big factor. But
so go through what are the different products you have? Actually, maybe start with in a pack, if someone's getting started and they want to do the ultralight packing, what are the essentials they should have in there? Like if they're going like on a 3-day hike or backpacking trip, what are the essentials that they should have in there? And then from there, maybe delve into your variety of products that you offer.
Yeah. If you want like a checklist of exactly what I take backpacking, you can just go to our website, outdoorvitals.com, and get the checklist. But the big ways that you're going to save weight are going to be, or what you called it used to be called the big 3, but it's really big 4, right? Which is your backpack. So like when I first started, I had like a 5-pound backpack. Our backpacks now are 2 pounds or less, typically with frames. So like you still have a frame and a nice hip belt, and you're under 2 pounds. So there's 3 pounds right there. Look at your sleep system, right? Like, our sleeping bags are usually about 2 pounds or less. They're kind of range between 1.5 to 2 pounds using, high quality downs. They compress down to, the size of a basketball roughly, right? You can save a lot of weight there compared to like my 9-pound sleeping bag when I started. Sleeping pads can be really, really big as well. And again, for there, like a Target would be definitely something under 2 pounds. You can easily get that. You do kind of get what you pay for when it comes to pads. I will say there's some brands like you'll see some in Costco. They're like, this is so light. This is so, great. And there's a lot of testing standards for warmth. And so pads can be worth investing in. And then your shelter, right? People can bring these big old shelters with big heavy poles and steel stakes and all of those kinds of things. For us, our 2-person shelter is 2 pounds.
Wow.
And that's a fully zipped in, fully sealed tent.
Yeah.
And you're using trekking poles actually to pitch that, which a lot of people hike with trekking poles.
Yeah.
So you can see just like across those 4 things, that's where you're going to get your most savings. Beyond that, it's really dialing in like your clothing and things like that. And people love to bring extras. So like really making sure you're not bringing extras, but then clothing is a big, big part of that too. Right. And knowing how to use clothing, right? Like a lot of people think that they need way more clothing than they do because they don't understand maybe taking off clothes when they're sweating. So they're not, getting cold that way by introducing sweat and water into their pieces, or just knowing when and how to layer in other ways. Right. But you can really get streamlined there as well. And so for us, we started with sleeping bags. That was like literally low hanging fruit. And then we did pads, and then we did tents, and then we did backpacks, or some combination of that, I guess. Then it wasn't until 2018 where we got into apparel. We had a lot of our customers really pushing us to do apparel, specifically like, you guys make sleeping bags. Why don't you make a puffy jacket? Yeah. And so I had an opportunity to introduce a brand new insulation to the market that was like a imitation down. It was a synthetic insulation that looked and acted, and the jacket looked like a down jacket.
It was something you guys designed and created?
I happened to come across a machine company at a trade show that built a machine that could make this. And instead of selling the machines, they're like, this insulation's so good, we just want to sell the insulation and like open up a new arm of our own business. So because we're direct to consumer, we could move really fast. We're working on like, all right, what's our fall line for 2 years out? It was like, let's build this and roll it out. So we built that, rolled it out, and we did it on Kickstarter, which is a crowdfunding platform. And that was our LoftTech jacket. And we raised $1 million in pre-orders with that jacket. And that kicked off our apparel side. So then from there, we just grew that arm exponentially to where we have all sorts of jackets and layers and things like that to dial that all in. But yeah, it's really like the best way to describe ultralight backpacking in a nutshell is it's a system. Like you just operate in a system where, like you systematize the process of what you bring, and it becomes very clear, very simple, less guesswork, less opinion in it. And you build confidence in that system, and it becomes very, very convenient, I guess, in terms of being able to go and do repeat hikes as well. It's not so much like you're sitting there deliberating, to take this or to take that. It's actually very simplistic approach. Think of it like a minimalist approach to backpacking, essentially.
Right. So there's a few different directions in my mind that I kind of want to go. You have a facility here. Is it mostly distribution, warehousing that you have? Yeah. And it's kind of on the north end of town, right? Or
it's right there by the cemetery in the center of town. Oh, so it's on that dead end road by the Karen share right there.
Oh, that's right.
Bought that building in 2018. So we're just back there, and that's our main hub for everything. So we ship worldwide essentially out of that facility.
Okay. Do you, when you're doing when you're having the manufacturing done, is all of that shipped here and then you ship it out, or do you have the manufacturers ship direct for you? Or
Nope. We bring it all into our own warehouse and then we ship it all straight out of our warehouse. We're really just a one location business. We still do like 8 or 9% of our total revenue comes from Amazon. So they still have a few of our products in their warehouses. But other than that, everything is stored here in Cedar and shipped.
So since you said 2014?
14 is when we started. 18 was that jacket.
So how, since 18, how is the growth and like the capacity at your current warehouse? How have you seen your company grow?
So I had bought a facility that it's kind of like, I guess what you'd call like your typical like shop lots, where you've got like an office in the front and a warehouse in the back. And so I bought the entire warehouse where I had like 9 of those. And so when I bought it, we just basically occupied like 2 of them, 3 of them, something like that. And then as we've grown, we've just kicked out the next tenant, expanded, kicked out the next tenant, expanded. So we're like punching holes through the walls and like connecting units and things like that. And so that's how we've adapted and grown here.
How many square feet is that total building?
About 12,000.
What's the square footage about that you're using now? Are you using the full thing now?
There's only 2 units we're not using. So we're probably occupying, I would say, but we also have 2 residential apartments in the building above it. So we're probably occupying about 8,000 square feet of it right now.
Do you see yourself in the next 5 years or so expanding even beyond that, you think? Or do you think?
We definitely can. We'll probably build a tack-on addition to the back of that building first. We have about 2 acres behind there. I don't know if we'll end up building like a big building right there or not, but we can at least expand, a few thousand more square feet just and integrate it pretty well. So that's kind of the first thing that we'll probably do. But long term, we do have enough acreage there to build an entirely new building if we wanted to. But it'd also be nice. Like, I mean, if I was just making a dream list, I'd love to find a piece of property on the I-15 frontage so that we could put up some signage, and we have a little showroom there, right?
Oh, okay.
We had a lot of customers that were like, "Hey, we're coming through Cedar. Like, we really want to stop and see." And we're like, they like walk into like our office and we're like, "We got nothing to show you. Like, it's all in boxes, you know?" So we did build a little showroom there, but eventually I'd love to have an expanded showroom and just kind of grow it in that capacity. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but some frontage property on the 15 would be like the dream someday to move into something like that. But
so you're outsourcing the manufacturing, and I'm getting more into the business side now. Do you ever see yourself trying to bring the manufacturing side in-house, or what are the pros and cons, I guess? Obviously outsourcing, especially when you're getting going, there's a huge cost benefit, but do you ever see yourself moving toward trying to bring the manufacturing in-house?
I think the only way that it works is through robotic automation. And I have a personal opinion about this that's probably different than what most people expect, right? My personal opinion is because it probably comes back to because I've traveled so much. I don't necessarily have a prejudice that like I'm better than someone in Asia, let's say, because I was born in America and that like I need to protect that. The reality is, by me spending money into Asia, I'm providing exponentially more jobs and impact than actually spending it with, say, a college kid sewing packs here or something like that. In fact, one time we were looking at a factory in Ethiopia, and I asked them what the economic multiplier was on $1 going into Ethiopia, and they said it was 37 times. Wow. Right. So that means that in America, that might be a 1-to-1 ratio. You spend $1, you're getting like $1 of economic impact. But going into Ethiopia, that dollar would roll 37 times farther to impacting and benefiting their economy, changing their quality of life, empowering them to whatever, start businesses, things like that. And because I had so many friends in, say, Malaysia and some of these places, I was very tied to impacting them. In fact, when I first started the business, I wanted specifically to go build a factory in Malaysia and offer these people 5-day work weeks and consistent pay, right? Like that would change their lives. So for me, I do have this, like, I take a lot of pride when I go walk these factories that I'm like employing these hundreds of families, and the impact that has on their kids becoming literate. Cause like I mentioned, we actually don't manufacture in China anymore. Part of that is due to tariff, but a large part of that is because they don't have people that want to work in factories anymore. They went through an industrial revolution where their kids, because their parents went and worked in factories, their kids were able to go to school, become literate. Once they were literate, they don't want to go work in the factory with their mom or dad anymore. They want to go get a skilled job.
You see a lot of that in the States, obviously.
Yeah. We were, we were the kind of pioneers of that, really. Yeah. We just didn't see it maybe in that sense. But now the same thing is happening. So every about 10 to 20 years, it'll roll. So like we're in Vietnam right now, but that's going to roll into another country in another 10 or 20 years. And that country will forever be changed in terms of literacy and economic growth and stability and all those things because of it. So I'd have some like underlying feelings around some of that, but in terms of
cool perspective. Yeah.
It's different, right? Because everyone else is us against them. And the thing is, this world is tiny now. Like we can't have us versus them anymore. Yes, we need to like protect ourselves. And we need to like, I'm all for like, security and national security. I'm all for, like we got to take care of the home front before we go help others and things like that. But, the more you travel, the more you just see like there are amazing people everywhere, and you would love to help them, I guess. And like you don't see yourself as per se, better or and I don't think people view it that way. Like that's not how they view it. Like I'm not saying people are like inherent, like if you want to manufacture in America, it's because you're prejudiced over other people. It's not that at all. It's just the more you travel, the more you start to realize the world is tiny. Yeah. Tiny. Like it used to be you crossed over the ocean in ships and it took weeks, right? But like now it's hours to get anywhere in the world.
And seconds to communicate with them.
Yeah. And like things like war and stuff like that, like they make no sense anymore because we have so much firepower that it's like war is just devastation, right? And one of the best ways to avoid war is to trade with people and to do business with people.
Build relations.
It's one of the most, they've found that's one of the most impactful things to avoiding conflict is to actually work with them. So I have a very interesting perspective on that, but I think a lot of that just comes from being able to travel and make friends and see tons of different religions, tons of different people, tons of different economic backgrounds, and just kind of open my mind to that. But again, that doesn't mean that we don't need to have bases covered in the US, that we need to manufacture some food and some clothing and some things.
And I was going to say, even with all that said, there's two thoughts I had. One was what you feel like you're doing, and I'm putting words in your mouth here, is you're not just going on a 1 week or 1 month humanitarian mission. You're helping contribute in a more long-term sustained way, right?
Yeah.
But that also doesn't mean that you're not contributing here to our market. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people locally talk about Outdoor Vitals, or how many things I go to where I see the OV logo and the owl that's not an alien, by the way.
The new one, right?
That good looking owl. Yeah. I mean, your company is still contributing here, and as it grows further, and that's kind of why I was curious about diving into like how your expansion has gone here, because your company is only going to continue to grow further here. And what a lot of people don't understand, not because of necessarily, I don't understand because they're just not involved. Like I don't understand all the nuances of some industries because I'm not involved in those industries. But one of the things people don't understand is a lot of times those synergies with these international companies might bring an international company here. If there's a manufacturer that says, hey, we're getting a lot of business in this area. I talk to Asian and European companies all the time that are looking and saying, hey, we're considering building in Iron County, Cedar City. It's because they have a market here. In fact, I think I've mentioned this on a podcast before. Phil Knight with Nike, his premise of creating Nike, which originally was what he just made up on the spot, Blue Ribbon Sports, in a meeting similar to what you had with that company in China. In Japan, he had this theory where the Japanese car market was undermining the American car market. And he thought he could do something like that with shoes, build it at a cheaper cost with a higher quality. And I'm really going tangential on this. But what he was able to do was to go into those international markets and eventually grow that here further, to build a company that, is a powerhouse internationally itself now, based here in the States. And so I'm blabbing a little bit on that digression because there's a balance in building those relationships.
Yeah.
Seemed like you had the thought.
No, I think that's true. Right. And the main thing that keeps you from being able to kind of like see it that way is just change the perspective. So like you can do this with anything, right? Like we could sit here and say, this is the local podcast, right? Well, what does local mean? Right. Does local mean my neighborhood? Does local mean Cedar City? Like we don't do business outside of Cedar City. We're just Cedar City because we only want to benefit Cedar City. Is it Southern Utah? Like include St. George in that? Like you draw the lines wherever you want to draw them. Right. But overall, business is a net lift on everything it touches. Right.
It's the classic all high tides raise all ships, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so like we're absolutely employing people in Cedar. Relatively speaking, we employ an actual higher pay demographic than most companies because we're hiring managers and directors and things like that are, designing product or doing massive amounts of marketing or things. Yes, we bring in people to run the warehouse, but like it's kind of full spread. But yeah, it's just like you could potentially have more impact here, but it's also impact versus say velocity. So like we could not grow as big because here's the thing, people vote with their dollars, right? So even the people that are like, you got to manufacture in the US, it's like, cool. Where's your shirt made? Where's your shoes made? Where's your car made? Where's this, right? You vote with your dollars. So if you really, really believe that, you have to like apply
invest in
that,
those.
right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you can look at it from the other perspective of, okay, because we can make things more economically, in overseas and other markets and labor markets and things, we're able to sell twice as much velocity here. So we're turning the money a lot more of it than we would here. If we didn't manufacture overseas, we'd probably be 1/10 of the size that we are total. Right. And so, that velocity, that ability to scale, all those kinds of things does also impact the local economy and the bigger economy in the US. But it's, where you draw the lines and all these kinds of things kind of are different perspectives from different people. But I guess the easiest way to say it is just like you said it, like business should be a net positive on everywhere it touches. And if it's not, then people should vote on that by how they spend their money. And that business should disappear. It's not creating value, then it should go away. So hopefully, we're always creating value and that benefits everywhere along our supply chain.
Yeah. I really, it's so cool seeing your company from you as a student at Southern Utah University, trying to make this entrepreneurship club, having this love of outdoors, trying to get into backpacking, obviously seeing a need. And it's cool to kind of hear that story and that progression. And I'm just so excited over, the next decade or so to kind of see where your growth trajectory goes from there. It's interesting to start a business at 23 years old. Yeah. Cause you have, I was always like a guy who was studying books and podcasts and you have like knowledge, but you don't have wisdom yet. Yeah. You don't have the application of it yet. And so we crossed over 10 years of business this last year. And it's been a really interesting transition to be able to kind of be like, man, look at how much more we know, but not know from a book perspective or you heard it here perspective, but we can look internally and see things like that. And so it's been awesome, right? It's kind of like one of those things where in the beginning, I'll be honest, like we made products and we've always made great products, especially for the price, but we've been able to push the envelope on how good a products. We're making some of the most innovative products in the world now, right here in Cedar. Like we were the first company that like brought in a 2-layered membrane rain jacket using a 3D print on the inside of it. Right. And it's incredibly effective because we're direct to consumer. We can afford to do it and still sell it at a decent price point. Whereas if Arc'teryx did that, it would be well over a $400 jacket. REI doesn't want to put it on a shelf. Right. So it's really cool to like look back on the 10 years and be like we've really come into our own stride the last few years in terms of the product. But even now, like we're making minor tweaks along the way and, just like you, it's going to be a really fun next 10 years to see. I knew a decent amount at 23 and I had a lot of drive, but I definitely needed more wisdom. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So we, thanks for indulging me. And we kind of dove into the nitty gritty about the business and building it and some of the love of outdoors. Now tell our audience if they want to learn more about Outdoor Vitals, because you also have like a membership thing that you do. Tell a little bit more about that. So we raised $2.5 million through crowdfunding.
That was a major way for us to grow because I didn't want to have any investors.
$2.5 million through crowdfunding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through multiple crowdfunding.
That is amazing.
Products. Yeah, we had $1 million jacket. We had a $750,000 campaign for pants.
Wow.
We've had. In fact, like to this, I'd have to check, but like when we had done that, and for a lot of years, it was the highest funded technical pant to ever raise money on Kickstarter.
Huh.
So we use that to avoid investors because what we've also seen is we care a lot about the purpose of Outdoor Vitals. And as soon as you bring in investors, purpose gets tweaked. It gets changed. They start selling the business every 3 to 5 years. And when they go to sell the business, what do? Well, they lay off departments and they tweak this and they tweak that. They quit investing in what they've invested in.
There's also mission creep a lot of times. Yeah.
There's a company here in Utah, and I won't say names, that donated a certain percentage. And then 5 years hits and they roll investors and that percentage gets cut in half. Right. And even though the founder is like still a part of that business and he still has his drive, it gets cut in half because he's just brought in, like he sold off so much of his company, right? Like investors have a huge significant impact on that. In fact, the only company that I really know of that never brought in venture capital is Patagonia. And whether you hate Patagonia or like Patagonia, the truth is those people have a belief system and they've stuck to it for 50 years. Right. And they've grown immensely and all that. But the thing is, you just have to be patient enough to not be like, hey, I want to double the size of my business next year and the year after that and year after. I want my cake and to eat it too. And so I'm going to sell to investors. Right. So for us, we raised a bunch of money through crowdfunding to grow without investors. And then from there, it became to this point where like crowdfunding was really about like having a bajillion pockets on a jacket and a built-in pillow and a koozie pocket and like, and so
the
our
Swiss
products,
Army knife of jackets.
Yes. Yeah. And our products were becoming more minimal and performance focused. And so we started to kind of grow in different directions from Kickstarter. And so then, thinking on that for quite a bit of time and I'd played with different ideas. We eventually created this membership for us, which it's a $10 a month membership. That $10 goes into store credit with us. So it's like a bank account. You just put $10 in every month and it goes into your OV credit account. And then, we give them discounts off of everything. We give them upgraded shipping. We give them exclusive items. We give them, a close Facebook group that they can communicate with us. We give them like all these things. And then we also take all the things we don't make ourselves, such as like freeze dried meals. Yeah. And we sell them behind a closed wall. Essentially, once they're members, they get access into that. We can sell them for cheaper than anywhere else. Like a membership
store or something.
We can sell them for cheaper than anywhere else because we don't have to follow MAP pricing, which is minimum advertisable pricing. So we've created a really cool system where it's a really big win for all of our customers. Like there's no way if you're backpacking, you can't spend $100 on food and water filters and even one product from us. But from us, it's actually been a really great way for us to stay investor free because we have this consistent income and it's essentially prepaid inventory for us. Right. And so it's allowed us to get away from Kickstarter, stay investor free, still be able to fund growth at an exponential rate per se. But it's been a really powerful thing. And we have thousands and thousands and thousands of members on this membership now.
That's awesome.
And it's been a really cool thing to just see what it's like. I say, it's like in business, everything should always be a win-win, right? And like this truly is one of those situations where we created something that's a huge win for customers. It's a huge win for us. And so it's grown and thrived really well.
That's awesome. Okay. Kind of the last thing that I want to dive into, because I would be remiss with our visit Cedar City Bryan Head and Office of Tourism. Living here, having your company here, loving the outdoors. Tell me some of your favorite outdoor things in Cedar City, Iron County area, favorite hikes in this area for those that are maybe trying to get into it, that are listening locally or maybe tourists that are coming.
I mean, the very best part about Cedar is in 45 minutes, you can be down in the desert. In 45 minutes, you can be at 11,000 feet at a ski resort, right?
I love that too. Yeah.
It's just a fantastic gateway to whatever kind of train you need to get to. So from a designing product perspective, we have the ability to go wherever we need to for whatever products we're currently testing. But yeah, as far as like specific things I love in Southern Utah, coming right out of Cedar City, right? Man, there's so many, right? Even like the gorge up here. Like I try not to tell people this, but like it's almost like the Zion Narrows.
You're talking Ashdown.
Yes. Ashdown Gorge. without having to go through permitting or a bajillion people or all those kinds of things.
Couple waterfalls.
Yeah. And that's 20 minutes outside of town. Right. But then you just continuing on, right. We go and hike a lot in Kolob National Park. You can get passes there so much easier. And it's, you're in Zion. It's an arm of Zion.
Kolob Canyon entrance. Yeah.
Yep. So we'll go there and backpack a lot. Easy to get permits and just fantastic. Really, really pretty. Going out just a hair farther though, we love the fact that we have the Tushers right here. The Tushers are like a gem in southern Utah that people don't realize too, where you can really get above tree line. Hiking into Blue Lake is one of my favorite. Just have that crystalline glacial blue color. And it's about a 5-mile hike. And so it's enough that you separate from the crowds. But there's so much beautiful country on the Tushers and a lot of backcountry on the Tushers. And then I love to go to Canaan Mountain, which is kind of the greater Zion area. And you can hike up Water Canyon, which is a beautiful, beautiful canyon. But then if you basically carve your way up the side of the mountain, you can get up into a backcountry wilderness experience, with kind of the sand and the red rock, and you get up above. If you've ever driven from, Hurricane over to Kanab, you pass those big, huge cliffs. You get right up on top of those big cliffs and can kind of look down. And so, man, there's so much here. I love the Pine Valley Wilderness. We'll go hike up in there a decent amount. And it's just interesting. Like there's some of those too that you just don't realize are here. Like you drive around Pine Valley all the time and you don't realize, hey, yeah, there isn't any roads that go up on top of that mountain. Oh, that's a wilderness. I didn't even realize it's a wilderness. Right. And so there's kind of a bit of everything you want here. Like I say, in the wintertime, I'm either going to go up and go skiing or snowshoeing, or I'm going to head down into the desert and enjoy, the warm weather of St. George. And it really is just a really great gateway. In fact, we bring a lot of YouTubers to southern Utah, and there's just, it's not hard at all to get them to want to come here, I guess you could say, because you're like, hey, we're going to go backpack on the west rim of Zion. It's like, okay, that's like the most beautiful, iconic hike, So it's fun to bring them in, but a lot of times we'll try not to do the most popular stuff. So we've taken them onto like Canaan Mountain or up on the Tushers or some different things. But yeah, there's so much here. The Virgin River Rim Trail, just up the canyon here. Also just another absolutely stunning hike that you can get onto in multiple spots and hike certain sections if you want. But, and then, man, the mountain biking's been growing here too, which is been awesome. Yeah. We did a podcast with Mac Urey about the mountain biking, Ironcraft. There's so much to, I don't know if you, know Hayden Hawks, had him on the podcast too. And one of the things he said is some of the trails here, he's been all around the world and it's still his favorite. There's few things around the world that compare to some of the trails around here. And it's awesome to have that natural aesthetic and beauty, but also to have the diversity of it that you are hitting on. I didn't even think about that for an outdoor company to be positioned in Cedar City, where you can, in the same day, you can test warm desert climate or cool, mountainous climate. And that's awesome. The only thing here, which most people will not see as a negative, is we don't have a ton of rain. So when it's time to test rain gear.
Yeah. There you go.
But we do get rain. One time we went to Seattle specifically to test some rain gear. Got no rain. Came back and did a hike through the Tushers. It rained for 3 days straight. So
when it rains, it pours, they say.
Yeah. So we get it, but it's 2 months out of the year.
Yeah.
So,
well, hey, thanks so much for being on the show. I actually have enjoyed kind of the variety of things we've been able to dive into. I guess it's because I love the outdoors and business is part of what I do. Yeah. Tell the audience to just kind of wrap up, tell them, where they can find Outdoor Vitals, both your website, social media, etc. Where should they go?
Yeah. So obviously website, outdoorvitals.com. From there, you can kind of branch out into anything. But the other two places that we do a lot of content per se is we do have a YouTube channel. We have a couple YouTube channels. We have a Tayson Whittaker YouTube channel, as well as an Outdoor Vitals YouTube channel. And then we have a podcast as well called the Live Ultralight Podcast. So if you're interested in getting outdoors and you like, I'm not just going to say, hey, go buy our stuff, but like you can totally just go there and just learn from stuff. We put a lot of content out there, as we've already talked about it, about just how to do things better. Right. And I mean, just to harp on that for 1 second, like there's a lot of things that I'll go and do that people think are absolutely crazy. And to me, they are the most straightforward, safe things you can imagine, but it's just simply having the knowledge, the confidence in the gear, the kit, how to use it, so like, so I've been to some of the most remote, beautiful places, around, and some people would think that it was, crazy or risky or anything like that. Like this last fall, I was snowed in my tent for 2 straight days at 12,000 feet, and people think like, man, that's like dangerous. That's crazy. And it's like, no, I was toasty, warm, dry, like and you really can have that, but it does take, a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of, going out on smaller trips, obviously first, just building a little bit of confidence, but anyone and everyone can go and spend phenomenal and have phenomenal experiences outside. And a great place to start is just start learning a little bit. So.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, Tayson Whittaker, founder and CEO of Outdoor Vitals. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully we'll see you around more.
Yeah. Appreciate you having me come on.
Yeah. Thanks.